All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let's begin. Our shir this morning is dedicated by Alan and Sue Meyrowitz, in memory of Sue's mother, Mindel Funeral, Mindel Bas Shlomo Tadris. We hope that in the merit of our time and Torah, Hashem will have an aliyah and the family in a chama. Thank you. And also dedicated, all the shirim dedicated this month by Leah's soul, and the zechus of our Shlema for our daughter Ilana Bas Esther. We hope that in the merit of our time and Torah, Ilana together with Kol Cholei Yisrael will have a complete and enduring refuah. And I will say with that, let's begin. A lot to do today. Today's daf is Chaf Gimel 23. We are picking up second line down from the top on Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. So if you remember again, we were discussing really a very interesting sugya, ultimately again regarding the halachos concerning Torim and Bnei Yonah, focusing on the idea that Bnei Yonah, the pigeons, only are kosher when they are young. The turtle doves are only kosher when they are older, mature. We discussed yesterday what old means, what young means. We also highlighted the idea that halacha l'maisa, once the feathers begin to turn golden, both for Torim and Bnei Yonah, the bird is disqualified from any subsequent use. So we left off yesterday in the interesting discussion as follows. We were discussing the idea about what happens, the Gemara was discussing the idea about what happens if a person says, Hareya lai ola min atorim o min bnei Yonah, and he brings a bird he brings both a tor and a ben Yonah whose feathers have begun to turn yellow. So the fundamental shaila we were dealing with is, the bird in this state of the feathers beginning to turn yellow, is this bird of suffix status, or does this bird just simply what? Is this bird a beria bifnei atzma? Is it its own entity? And we were discussing the nafkaminas for that. So the Gemara was discussing the idea that it makes sense if you say it's a beria bifnei atzma, that it's its own entity. That's why the Gemara would have learned out the exclusion of such an animal for sacrificial purposes from a pasuk. But if it's just a suffix, what the status of the animal is, then why would I need a pasuk ultimately to teach me that you cannot use it for a carbon? If it's suffix, if we're not sure what its status is, then of course you can't use it for a carbon. I don't need a pasuk for that. To which the Gemara answered, the reason I need the pasuk, or the exclusionary phrase min atorim or min bnei Yonah, which means that only some Torim, some Bnei Yonah are fit, but others are not, was ultimately again to exclude the case of nirva and ne'evad. If the animal again was sodomized, the bird was sodomized, or was worshipped as avodah zarah. So min teaches me that if the bird had any of these issues, ultimately again it cannot be used for a carbon. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why we need this limud. Sagadait chamina, because one might have thought, hoil uksiv kimash chasam bahem mum bam, because what's in the Torah it says, look at Rashi, hoil uksiv gabi karbanos, because the pasuk says by karbanos in general, ki mash chasam bahem mum bam lo yeratzu lachem. We'll say ultimately again, when it says ki mashchasam bahem, there's mashchas in them. We'll discuss what that means. Mum bam, there is a mum in it. So Rashi says lo yirtzu lachem de bein hashchasa bein mum postlin bahem. So we'll say there are two things that could disqualify in a carbon. What we call mashchasam, some type of hishchis, some type of destructiveness, and a mum, or some type of blemish. So watch this. V'tanid Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Shmuel taught as follows. Kol makom shene'emar hashchasa eino ela dvar erva. I will say wherever the Torah uses the lashon of hashchasa always refers to some matter of immorality. Dvar erva. Va'avodas kol makom shene'emar hashchasa eino ela dvar erva va'avodas kochavim. So we'll say hashchasa always refers to a lashon to either immorality or idolatry. So where do we see this from? Dvar erva dichsiv ki hishchis kol basar as darko. So we'll say, so we know that hishchis means immorality, ultimately again from the Dar Hamabul, right? Ki hishchis kol basar as darko, every living thing had corrupted its way. That's a reference to immorality. Al kol haaretz avodas kochavim dichsiv pen tashchisun va'asisem lochem pesel. And idolatry, because the pasuk says pen tashchisun, lest you engage in destructiveness and make for yourself idols. So we'll say, so we see over here that the lashon of hashchasa refers to both immorality as well as idolatry. So I would have thought as follows. So we'll say, so what you see in one pasuk, the Torah says, Kimash chasam bahem mum bam. So the Torah talks about mashchasam and mum in the same pasuk. Now we've established that what does mashchasam refer to? Mashchasam, or lashon of hishchis, could refer to immorality, could refer to idolatry, and of course mum is a mum. Mum is a blemish. So we'll say the fact that all of these items are mentioned in the same pasuk leads me to the following conclusion. Kol shehamum poselbo, divar erva va'avodas kochavim poslimbo. So we'll say, using this logic, the fact that the invalidation of immorality and idolatry are mentioned in the same pasuk as mum would lend me to the following conclusion. Any carbonic animal in which a mum invalidates it, so too divar erva and avodas kochavim invalidate it. So too if the animal was sodomized or the animal was worshipped as idolatry, so ultimately again that would invalidate the animal. Conversely, the chol she'in hamum posabo in divar erva va'avodas kochavim posabo, and I would say conversely as well, which would tell me what? Any animal which is not invalidated by a mum, therefore what? Is also not invalidated for matters of immorality or idolatry. And therefore that would lead me to the next conclusion. V'hani ofos, or also when it comes to birds, hoyo v'lo psil buhu muma. Both is actually incredible halacha. The halachos of mum do not apply to birds. Do not apply to birds. The halachos of mumim only apply to animals, to livestock. So the Gemara says, Damar mar, tamos v'zichros bebehema, vein tamos v'zichros ba'ofos. The Rebbe said, there's only, tamos means wholeness. Wholeness. The obligation or the criteria of wholeness, meaning no mum is only a din by animals, right? By livestock, we'll call it, but does not apply ultimately again to birds. Zichros Avosai means that the animal has to be male. So certain karbanos dafka have to be male. These concepts do not apply to bird offerings. I might have thought, therefore, because the halachos or the disqualifications of mum do not apply to birds, so I might have thought that therefore again halacha lemaisa ema dvar erva va'avodas kochavim nami lo livsuhu. I would have thought that therefore again the disqualifications of immorality and idolatry also don't apply to birds. Kamashron, that is not the case. Kamashron both say that this goes back to the first line on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. Kamashron from the word min atorim umin b'nei hayona teaches me again about say that what? That if a bird was involved in immorality, or if a bird was worshipped as idolatry, that halacha l'maisa, that will in fact invalidate the bird, even though what? Even though halacha l'maisa, mum does not disqualify by a bird. Good. So the Gemara goes weiter. By Rabbi Zera. So we'll say, so before we go on, so I'll tell you something interesting. Actually, not yet. All right, let's do a little weiter. By Rabbi Zera, Haomer Harei Alai Olas Behema. So let's listen to this case. So a person says, Harei Alai Olas Behema, which means ultimately again that if I hereby go ahead and take upon myself an Olas Behema. I hereby take upon myself to bring an Ola. Right? What happens? I'll say Mina Ayil or Mina Keves. And I go ahead and I bring it from the ayil or from the keves. So we'll say, now, in this case over here, I'm taking upon myself to go ahead and bring the ola, right? And ultimately, again, I want to bring it from the ayil or from the keves. And Rashi says, me'izo she'ertza. So I want to bring it from whichever one I want, right? In other words, I'm committing myself ultimately to bring an ola. That's the obligation. What I'm doing is I'm giving myself the ability, or I'm leaving open the possibility to bring it from an ayul or from a keves, right? From whatever I want. And what happens? The heavy palgas, and I end up bringing a palgas. So what's a palgas? Rashi says over here, palgas is keves ben shana besoch shnaso kar keves. What's interesting over here is as follows. The same way that by the bird offerings, so we spoke about this idea that a bird, once its feathers begin to turn gold or begin to turn yellow, so its status is questionable. We're going to see that this same concept applies in the sheep family as well. So look at this Rashi Palgas. Keves ben shana, Keves ben shana, besoch shna so kari keves. So we'll say a sheep within its first year of life, right? Within the first year is called the keves. It's called the keves. Va'ayil Misha avru alav yud gimel chadashim. It's called an ayil, which we often translate as a ram. It's called a ram when? At the age of 13 months, right? So a keves is within 12 months. An ayil is 13 months and older. So you see again what's going to happen. So he says, Palgus b'soch chodesh rishon shel shana shniya. We'll say, what's a palgus? So a palgus is a sheep 12 months, between the 12-month and 13-month mark. And we'll say it's that in-between awkward sheep stage, right? Where you're going through changes and you're just not exactly sure where you're holding. Right? So the sheep ultimately, again, is 12 months. We'll say it's actually quite fascinating. So remember, within 12 months it's called the keves, 13 months and above it's called an ayil. The status in month number 12. Month number 12 is what we call a palgas. So we'll say, so now watch this. In this case over here, I said I'm hereby bringing an ola. I'm leaving it open to say, if I want to bring it from the ayil, I'll bring it from an ayil or from keves. So we'll say what I'm saying, and remember, an ola could be brought from either a ram or from a sheep. Either from a ram 13 months and above, or from a sheep 12 months and below. That's the halacha. So what ends up happening, we'll say, behevi palgus, and I end up bringing the palgus animal. The animal at 12 months old. So mahu, I will say, so what's the halacha? Have I satisfied my obligation or not? So watch this. Alibad Rabbi Yochanan lo tibaylechav. So what's the current Rabbi Yochanan? It's not a kasha. Why? Du amar beri yahavi. So we'll say Rabbi Yochanan happens to hold that the palgas is its own entity. Palgas is its own entity. So the Gemara says, this nan, hekrivo mevi alav niske ayil, ve'ein ola lo mizivcho. So we'll say, because watch this. Mishnah has something different. Mishnah says that ultimately, again, if I offer up this palgas, I offered up a palgas as a carbon. So I'll say, so the shaila is, which nesachim, which libations do you bring with a palgas? So the Mishnah over here says, if you offer up a palgas, you bring the nesachim of an ayil. You bring the corresponding wine libations of an ayil, a mature sheep, right? But ultimately, again, it doesn't satisfy your obligation. So in other words, you'll bring the nesachim of an ayil, but if you had an obligation to bring this carbon, bringing the palgas does not satisfy your obligation. Vam Rabbi Yochanan, o la ayil, the Rabbo says palgas. And also, even Rabbi Yochanan learns that out from what? Rabbi Yochanan learns after, because the pasuk says, o la ayil. O la ayil teaches me that there are additional karbanos besides an ayil that get the nesachim of an ayil. Which other karbanos besides an ayil which get the nesachim of an ayil? A palgas. But the point over here is that what? According to Rabbi Yochanan, a palgas is a beria b'fnei atzmo. That's why, again, if you bring a palgas in satisfaction of a carbonic obligation, you have not satisfied your obligation. Because a palgas is a beria b'fnei atzmo. It's an animal, it's a designation, it's an animal onto itself. Right? It's not a keves and it's not an ayil. Therefore, if you bring it, it does not satisfy your obligations. Therefore, the Gemara says over here that if you look at Rashi, ve'ein olu mizivcho im haya mechuyav ayil levado o keves levado. So we'll say if I was obligated to bring an ayil or a keves and I bring a kalb and I bring a palgas, it does not work. So therefore, that's the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan clearly holds that a palgas is an animal b'fnei atzmo. Therefore, using that logic, ultimately, again, if I said Harei alai ola, I take upon myself to bring an ola, but I leave the door open that I can bring. I say if I want to bring it from an ayil, I'll bring it from an ayil, and I bring it from a keves, I'll bring it from a keves, and I bring it from a palgas. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's clear that I have not satisfied my obligation. Why not? Because a palgas is a beria bifnei atzma. That's clear. Where does the question come up? Kiti ba'ilacha. The question comes up. Aliba de bar pada. Both say the shaila comes up according to Bar Pada. What did Bar Pada say? Da Amar Amud Beis. Da Amar Maisi Umasni. So both listen to this, because Bar Pada holds that ultimately, again, if you are right, that you could bring a palgas with a t'nai. Both say take a look at the top Rashi Chav Gimel Amud Beis. Maisi Umasni. The Svira lay Safeku. Vahacha Kami Bailan Aliba de Bar Pada. So this is what say. So Bar Pada happens to hold that halacha lemaisa, you could bring a palgas in satisfaction of an obligation. You just have to go ahead and bring it with a t'nai. And we're going to see what now Rashi already says over here. The svirle safeku v'achal kami bailar libud de Bar Pada b'may mistapek umay masni. So we'll say ultimately again. Now we're going to see according to Bar Pada what exactly is it that you're making a condition on. So watch this. Mi aminan ba'al v'keves masna beberia lo masna. So we'll say listen to this. According to Bar Pada, so we'll say let's say again. This is our case. I'm saying harei alay ola mina ayla mina keves. I hereby obligate myself to bring an ola, but I leave the door open. That if I want to bring it from an aisle, I'll bring it from an aisle. I want to bring it from a keves, I'll bring it from a keves. And what? I bring a palgas. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's clear that the palgas does not satisfy my obligation. But according to Bar Pada, who says that you could bring a palgas with a tanai, what's my shaila? What tanai, which tanai do I make? Do I say mi'amrinam ba'ayel v'keves masna, beberia lo masna, o dilma beberia nami masna? So you're supposed to listen to this. There are two different types of tanaim that I can make here. Tanai number one says that palgas is either an ayil or a keves. So therefore, again, when I say harei alai ola min ha'ayil or min ha'keves, and I bring the palgas, and now what happens, Rabosai? I bring the palgas. So what happens? I bring the palgas. So according to Bar Pada, on one hand I could say I'm bringing the palgas. If the palgas is an ayil, then the carbon will be an ayil. If the palgas is a keves, then ultimately again the palga will be a keves. Or do I entertain three possibilities? That maybe a palgas is an ayil, maybe a palgas is a keves, and maybe a palgas is what? Beria bifnei atzma. It's its own entity, and therefore the Tanai, according to Bar Pada, covers all three of those possibilities. If it's an ayil, it's an ayil. If it's a keves, it's a keves. And if it's a beria bifnei atzma, then it's a beria bifnei atzma, and I have not satisfied my obligation. So the Gemara is really asking, according to Bar Pada, ultimately again, which would be the Tanai that you would be making? To which the Gemara says, Teku. To which the Gemara says, we're not sure. So we'll say, here's what we know. According to Rabbi Yochanan, this case never gets off the ground because the palgas cannot satisfy my obligation for an olah, because the palgas is an animal unto itself. It's a very bifnei answer. According to Rabbi Yochanan, according to Bar Pada, I know that I can bring it with a Tanai. What we're not sure ultimately again is which Tanai are you bringing it with. So we'll say, I just say something interesting, because the truth is you can imagine this kind of case actually would come up. Because Lamaisi, and remember, you're dealing with a palgas is a very limited state. Month number 12, between month number 12 and month number 13, that's ultimately again when you have a palgas. So listen to this. So the Rambam actually brings down this case in Hilchos Maser Karbanos. And the Rambam writes as follows: Nadar ola min hakvasim o min ha'ilim, the heavy palgas. But let's say if a person made a neder ultimately again to bring an ola from kvasim or from elim, and he brings a palgas, harei ze safek im yatsa nidro o lo yatsa. It's a suffix. It's a suffix, I will say. So therefore, again, in the case of suffix, you usually have to end up bringing another carbon in order to satisfy your obligation. V'chin hanodar olas of min hatorim o min b'nei Yona v'hevi tchila satsiuv shebazeh v'shebazeh harei ze suffix. And I will say, the Rambam brings down the same thing by the animal, by the bird, whose feathers began to turn yellow. It's a suffix. I will say, in these cases where you have these animals in these in-between states, the Rambam paskins that ultimately such an animal, well, first of all, what's important to understand is the Rambam paskins that these animals are not a beria bifnei atzma. They're not their own entity. They're not something new here, but it is a suffix as to whether or not they're considered to be young or mature. So fundamental suffix. Says the Gemara, weiter. Another very interesting case. By Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera has the following kasha. Ha'omer harei alai lachmei toda min hachametz o min hamatzah. So this is an interesting case, I will say, which ultimately, again, the Gemara is going to, the mechanics of the case, we're going to get to in just a little bit. Right now, we'll just translate. The person says, I hereby take upon myself to bring toda loaves. Now, under normal circumstances, so a toda is a 40 loaf offering. Right, we spoke about this extensively in Meseches Menachos. Right, some are matzah, some are lechem, some are thick, some are thin. Okay, all different types of bread, but 40 loaves. In this case over here, the person is saying Harei alai lachme toda. Rashi understands the case ultimately of being that he's going ahead and he's going ahead and making and pledging 10 loaves. We'll see this a little in a bit. Right, he's going ahead and pledging 10 loaves. So we'll say, now watch this. Now he's saying, Harei alai lachmei toda min hachametz. Now let's remember again, out of the 40 loaves that are brought, ultimately again, 30 of them are matzah, 10 of them are chametz. So when he says, I hereby take upon myself to bring lachmei toda min chametz, he's pledging to bring 10 loaves, 10 chametz loaves. Now watch this. Harei lachmei toda min chametz or min matzah. He's hereby pledging to bring 10 loaves, but they could be chametz or matzah. Okay, so again, we'll see the mechanics in just a moment. Rashi says, min chametz or min matzah, yud chalos me'izim min she'ertze. I take upon myself to go ahead and bring 10 loaves from whichever type I want. Whether I want to bring chametz, whether I want to bring matzah, that's my choice. Now watch this. The heavy seir, and I will say, what does he bring? He brings seir. Seir we normally translate as like sourdough. But we'll get into the technical definition right here. Mahu. What's the halacha? So in other words, the shaila is really what the Gemara is asking is, what's the status of this sourdough? Is this matzah? Is it lechem? Or is it a beria b'ftan? So also the common denominator amongst all of these discussions we're having is what? Is items which do not seem to fit directly into a particular category. Right? What is their status? Whether that's birds, whether that's the palgas, or now I will say in the case of the seyor. Right? Mahu. What's the halacha? To which the Gemara says, seyor deman. Ultimately, again, what are we talking about? Seir deman. Or I should say, seir according to who? Is seir drabi. So we'll say, now let's, before we go on with this, look at Rashi for just a moment. Seir. We'll say, this is actually a fascinating discussion. Rashi says, so listen to this. Rabbi Meir Rabbi Huda pligi be'elu over. So we'll say, there's a fundamental machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda. Here's the machlokes. Rabbi Meir, havi seir, B'hachsafas panim. We'll say, according to Rabbi Meir, dough becomes sourdough as soon as it, quote unquote, becomes pale. Meaning, as soon as there's almost like a pale color on the dough, it has the status of sourdough. Va'afilu ein sham sedak, even if the dough has not become cracked. V'im nisdak, but once it becomes cracked, afilu kekarni chagavim, even if it has very minor cracks. Karni chagavim means like the antenna of grasshoppers. Even if it has very minor cracks, mikri siduk, that is called cracked, v'chayiv kares. And ultimately, we'll say, if you eat that dough, you are chayiv kares. Why? Because that is called chametz. V'ser dachsafas paramin reishvel. So we'll say, so again, so according to Rabbi Meir, the definition of seir, for which you is called seir once it becomes pale. Right, once the complexion dough becomes pale, but ultimately again it becomes chametz gomer once it develops cracks in the sourdough. Once there are cracks, then halacha l'maisa again it's chametz, and if you eat it, you are chayiv kares. Rabbi Meir mechayiv malchus. Rabbi Huda islay trekule. Rabbi Huda on the other hand is more mekel. What does he hold? Chada dechsifu panav afilu seir lo mikri ukikarni chagavim hu de mikri seir. Va'od kulach risi tevahav the kari Rabbi Huda seir lo mechayiv la malchus. So let's listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, holds that the turning pale of the dough by itself is not problematic. Furthermore, even though it is problematic when it develops cracks, if you eat it, you're not chayiv. So Rabbi Yehuda is very, very mekel. Even if it develops cracks, Rabbi Meir will hold that it really becomes aser once it becomes pale, but you're only chayiv kares if what? If it developed cracks and then you ate it. Rabbi Yehuda, if it becomes pale, it's fine. And even once it develops cracks, you're not allowed to eat it. But if you eat it, you're not chayiv kares. So we'll say, so here's the shaila. So now I went ahead and I said, Harei alai lachmei toda min hachametz u'min hamatzah. I hereby take upon myself to bring 10 loaves for a toda, either from chametz or from matzah. And now I bring my sourdough. Right? I bring my seir. So I'll say, so what's the shaila? What's the shaila? Have I satisfied my obligation or not? I must say now the underlying shaila in this is, what's the status of sourdough? Is it chametz? Is it matzah? Or is it its own category? Like the pal, right? Like the other questions we had before. So now, Tushti Gemara says, well, let's analyze this. Seir demand. I say, when you say you're bringing sourdough, what kind of sourdough are you bringing? Is seir Rabbi Meir? So we'll say, if you want to say that it's the seir of Rabbi Meir, so we'll say, remember, the seir of Rabbi Meir was what? Is where the dough developed a pale complexion, right? It became pale. So if that's the case, the Rabbi Huda, so we'll say, if it's Rabbi Meir's definition, according to Rabbi Huda, matzah ma'al yosihi, right? They will say Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Meir's definition of the dough becoming pale, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is regular matzah. So if it's just sourdough that became pale, which is Rabbi Meir's definition, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that would be fine. Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Meir, and I will say if ultimately again it's Rabbi Yehuda's definition according to Rabbi Meir, right, which means if it became pale, then according to Rabbi Meir, chametzu, then it's already chametz. V'id Rabbi Meir le Rabbi Meir, right? Medalki, so the Gemara says, and if ultimately again it's Rabbi Meir's definition, medalki ale chametzu. Ultimately again I will say it'll be chametz gomer. Ella, so we'll say, so rather whose definition are we using? Ella, the Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Yehuda mai. Rather both say in Rabbi Yehuda's Shita himself. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Ella de Rabbi Yehuda, it's in the wider lines of Rashi, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines in. Ella de Rabbi Yehuda. Rather says the Gemara as follows. Ella de Rabbi Yehuda, the karni chagavim. Rather I will say ultimately again it's Rabbi Yehuda, if the dough became cracked and ultimately again developed the dough became cracked. It developed small cracks. So the karnei chagavim. So we'll say rather el Rabbi Yehuda umiboyle aliba Rabbi Yehuda the amar beser didei yisaref ama yesh botzad chametz v'ka'amar ha'ochlo pater ama lav vadei chametz. So we'll say watch this. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what happens if the dough develops cracks? What happens? Halacha l'maisa. The dough develops cracks. Number one, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to eat it, right? You really should burn it, but if you eat it, you're not chayiv. So I'll say, so what's the status? Is it chametz or is it matzah? So my sveika havya v'nafak mina v'nafak. So sveika hava. Do we say that such sourdough ultimately again is a suffix v'nafak mimanavshach? And I will say ultimately again you are yotze mimanavshach. What's the manavshach? So no say in other words, if it's a suffix means either it's chametz or it's matzah. Therefore, in a case where I brought this sourdough and I said I'm bringing this ultimately again in satisfaction of an obligation for a toda, 10 loaves, chametz or matzah, and I leave open for myself either chametz or matzah, then I will say then what? I am yotze ultimately again with this sourdough. O dilma, or ultimately again beryahu. Velo nafik, or I say, do I say that the sourdough ultimately is its own beria, is its own entity, and therefore again I am not yotze with it. So the Gemara says, V'ham Ravuna, ha'omer harei alai lach metoda. So we'll say, so again, so it's the same kasha. Now what we've further defined is we're asking according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we'll say where even if the dough develops cracks, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you should burn it, you shouldn't eat it. But if you ate it, you're not chayiv malchus. If you forget about kar, it's not even chayiv malchus, not chayiv anything. So is it chametz or is it matzah? So we'll say, why does that matter? If I say, I hereby take upon myself to bring 10 loaves for a toda, and they could either be chametz or matzah, and I bring this sourdough, do I say the sourdough is suffix, and therefore one way or the other I fulfill my obligation, or is it beri b'fnei atzma? To which the Gemara says, V'ham Ravuna, ha'omer harei alai lach metoda, maybe toda v'lachma. The chayvan de chayiv le betoda v'lachma ha lo yada hay gavra ichametzu. So we'll say, so listen to this. So Rav Huna comes along and says, isn't there a bigger problem here? If a person says harei alai lach metoda, we'll say whenever you say I hereby commit myself to bring the loaves of a toda, we'll say remember again, what are you committing yourself to? What are you committing yourself to? The whole thing, right? The whole thing. I'm committing myself not just to the loaves, but to the carbon also. So therefore, maybe toda v'lachma. I have an obligation to bring the toda as well as its loaves. And we'll say now that I'm obligated to go ahead and bring a toda and its respective loaves, I don't know, does this sourdough count as chametz, and therefore I have to supplement the matzah loaves? Or is it matzah, and therefore I'm obligated to go ahead and bring chametz? So we'll say, so remember again, the problem that Rav Huna brings up over here is the whole case doesn't make sense. Because the moment you say, harei alai lach metoda, what you've done is, even though you've only articulated the obligation to bring the loaves, you have actually obligated yourself in the carbon in its entirety. And if I don't know what the status of this sourdough is, I don't know what other types of loaves I have to bring. Do I have to bring other lechem? Do I have to bring other matzah? So therefore, it says Gemara lo tzricha, do amar harei alai chala liftar todaso shel ploni. So we'll say the Gemara further defines the case where I say I hereby obligate myself to bring the chalos for Ploni's Toda. My friend Ruvain is bringing a carbon Toda, and therefore again, I'm not obligating myself in a carbon Toda, but rather I'm obligating myself, I'm taking upon myself the obligation to provide some of the loaves for Ruvain's Toda. Look at Rashi. We'll say it's about 10 lines up from the bottom in Rashi. L'tzicha d'amar harei alai yud chalos liftar todaso shel Ploni, delo mechayiv alei bekul humem. Therefore, I will say, because I'm not obligating, I'm not saying Harei Alai Toda, but rather I'm saying that I'm hereby taking upon myself to supplement someone else's Toda. That statement does not trigger a 40 loaf obligation. Sof, but even if that's true, Ha lo yada haigavra ichametzu delesi, ichametzu delesi matzah, imatzu delesi chametz. But say still the problem that we expressed before is still there, which is fine. So I'm taking upon myself to go and bring, to help Ruvain out, I'm hereby going to bring 10 loaves of Ruvain's Toda, either chametz or matzah. The problem is also when I'm bringing this sourdough, what don't I know? Is it chametz or is it matzah? So Ruvain still doesn't know what he has to bring in order to go ahead and complete his carbon. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Lo tzricha dala amar liftar meifik gavra yidei nidra nafik o lo nafik. So we'll say ultimately again, to which the Gemara says, you're right, the case is, I did not say liftar. I did not say I'm coming to go ahead and help Ruvain fulfill his obligation. Look at Rashi just a moment. So Rashi about 7 lines up from the bottom. L'tzicha delo amar liftar ela harei alai yud chalas l'tadasa shel Ploni. So we'll say ultimately again, we're reframing it over here. What I'm saying is, I hereby obligate myself to bring 10 loaves for the Toda of Ploni. For the Toda of Ploni. Dechevan da'amar l'todasa shel Ploni lo echayiv le bitoda. Ultimately, again, because I'm saying Dechevan da'amar l'todasa shel Ploni, because I'm saying ultimately again that I'm bringing for a Toda for Ploni. I'm sorry. Dechevan da'amar l'todasa shel Ploni lo echayiv le bitoda. So we'll say number one, because I'm saying that this is for Ploni's Toda, therefore when I say I'm bringing it, it does not trigger a Toda obligation on me. Furthermore, v'lachma ela be'eser v'avadai pshitalan dahi Ploni lo miftar b'hai seir v'ihu nami lo mekabel alei le miftarei ela la'asuyinhu ba'alma ukasavar shiyucha likari v'matshachar. Well, which the Gemara says essentially, what's happening over here is I'm just bringing a nice gift towards the Toda of Ploni. I'm not obligating myself in Toda, therefore it doesn't trigger the 40 loaf obligation, number one. Number two, I'm actually just, I'm doing something nice and bringing these loaves in addition to whatever Ploni is bringing for his Toda. But I do not mean that ultimately, again, these loaves should help him satisfy his obligation. But I will say, but bottom line, halacha l'maisa, the suffix still stands, which is, what is the status ultimately again of the sourdough? So we'll say, so first of all, interestingly enough, the halacha is, just as an aside, if a person says, Harei alai lachmei Toda, if a person goes ahead and says, I hereby take upon myself, right, to bring loaves of a Toda, the way that Rambam Paskin says, oh sorry, first I didn't finish the Gemara. So lo tzricha delo amar lemiftar meifek gavri yidei nidra olo. So we'll say, so the shaila is, if, so leaving aside that I'm not bringing these to help Ploni satisfy his Toda obligation. Rather, again, I'm just pledging 10 loaves. I'm pledging 10 loaves towards the Toda of my friend. So leaving aside that I'm not triggering my own obligation to bring a Toda, I'm not actually really helping him all that much in the satisfaction of his Toda. The shaila is, have I fulfilled my neder or not? I made a neder to bring 10 loaves towards the Toda offering of my friend. What am I bringing for those 10 loaves? Seyor. Seyor, bringing sourdough. Have I satisfied my obligation or not in that neder? We'll say, what does that depend on? That depends on the status of seyor. Is seyor lechem? Is seyor matzah? Or is seyor something else? To which the Gemara says, teku. To which the Gemara says, we're not sure. The status of seyor, we'll say, is really suffix. Now, interesting enough, in this particular case, is rooted in a much more fundamental machlokes, ultimately again between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Good. The Rambam, however, happens to ask on an important and an important detail in this Gemara, which is Harei alai ha'omer Harei alai lachmei toda. Well, say if you obligate yourself to bring the loaves of a toda, what's talacha? Yavi toda v'lachma. Just understand that a statement to bring the loaves of a toda ultimately what? Ultimately obligates you to bring a toda in its entirety. Good. We'll say, let's begin the Mishnah. So kasher bepara, pasal be'egla. Ultimately, again, I will say the halacha is that which is kasher by a para aduma is pasal by egla arufa. Which I will say, remember again, para aduma is shechted in a normal way. Egla arufa, we'll say, has its neck broken in the back. So that which works by para does not work by egla, right? So once again, remember, if you shecht an egla arufa, so ultimately, remember again, egla arufa is when you find a person who is murdered in between two cities. The elders of the closest city come, decapitate the calf, wash their hands over the calf, say yadenu lo shafku damzeh. So kasher bepara pasal beegla. That which works by paraduma, i.e. shchita, does not work by egla arufa. Kasher beegla pasal bepara. Similarly, again, that which works by an egla arufa does not work by a para aduma. So it says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, para b'shchita, so here we go, para b'shchita, kshera, ba'arifa psula. We'll say para aduma, so if you shecht it, it's kasher. If you break its neck, right, it is pasal. Egla ba'arifa kshera b'shchita psula. We'll say egla arufa, if you break its neck, ultimately is kasher, but if you shecht it, it is pasal. Nimtseis, kasher bepara, pasal be'egla, kasher be'egla, pasal bepara. It turns out that which is good by a para aduma, i.e. shchita, is pasal by an egla arufa, and that which is kasher by an egla arufa, i.e. the breaking of the neck, ultimately is pasal by para aduma. So says the Gemara, utehei para kshera ba'arifa mikal v'chomer. Why don't we say that what? That a para aduma should be kasher with decapitation. Well, so we call it decapitation, I'll tell you the breaking of the neck. Right? Why don't we say that even a paraduma should be good? Because we'll say, remember again, paraduma is not consumed. Right? It's not consumed, nor is paraduma a regular type of carbon. Because remember again, where was the avoda of paraduma done? Where was it performed? On Harazis. We'll say, actually, we know today, we know the actual site. You could go to the site of where the parad is. I mean, it's a monastery now. Right? But ultimately, again, or a farm, I don't know if it's an active monastery. It was a monastery. Right, but you could see. We know where the paraduma was because it was done in a specific location where you could see right into the heichal, right into the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll say. So again, paraduma is very unique. Normally, karbanos require shchita. Paraduma, on one hand, it's sacrificial, but it's not really a true carbon. So the Gemara goes and entertains the possibility. Tehei para kasher if makav chomer. I would think that paraduma should be kasher through decapitation or breaking its neck with a kav chomer. So what's the kav chomer? Uma egla shalo hokshra b'shchita hokshra ba'arifa. We'll say ultimately again the egla, which is not kosher by shchita, but ultimately again is kosher ba'arifa. Ultimately, again, we'll say so an egla arufa, which cannot be shechted. It can only be decapitated. Right? Para shehochshra b'shchita. Eino din shokshra ba'arifa. So we'll say, so again, we're going to discuss what this kavachomer means. Therefore, certainly a para which can be shechted, certainly it should be good also with arifa as well. To which the Gemara says, top of Chavdalet, Amar Kra, v'shachat v'chuka. We'll say when it comes to para aduma, the Torah uses the lashon of v'shachat, which means slaughtered, and chuka. We'll say, what does chuka mean? Chuka mean, Rashi says, shachat v'chuka, tap Rashi Chavdal Mdaf, v'shachat also the fun of ksiv, zos chukas haTorah. So therefore we'll say, what does that tell me? B'shchita in, ba'arifa lo. Since it uses lashon of shachat and chuka, that teaches me that what? That shchita is the chukah, shchita is the everlasting statute, and therefore the paraduma can only be offered up by shchita and not with arifa. All right, so we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up the rest of this Gemara tomorrow.